developers choose what they want to do, and they do it whenever they feel like it. So this is an amazing environment. It's been described by Eric Raymond as a bazaar, B-A-Z-A-A-R, bazaar, where kind of everybody seems to be coming and going. And so when you look at how the operational environment, it's certainly a mystery if you were an operational manager. Say, how in the world can we coordinate all that and make this really useful, sophisticated, integrated product? So that's the operational mystery. And then in terms of success, we also have the success mystery that says, why do some of these projects succeed while others fail? When we recognize that there's no more than 5% of these projects actually produce any useful result. And again, because this is new and because these are so different, we really don't have a good handle on that. So these are the mysteries that have motivated this work. Now, specifically, our specific research objective for this dissertation is to address the success mystery. And that's what we want to address, the community success. We're using social network structure as a way of addressing it because there's been so much research to show that social network structures do make a difference in various kinds of social and organizational outcomes. And it's a very rich kind of a measure. So we're using social network perspective. We address the success mystery to see if we can shed some light on it by doing this first large-scale study of open source projects. But there's really a broader motivation, and kind of our broader research objective is, we're really intrigued by this whole situation. This really seems like something fundamentally new. What does it mean? Where could it go from here? There's been a great deal of speculation in the literature about the idea that open source models and principles and methods might be extended beyond software. They can be applied to developing drugs and creating airliners. And there's all sorts of ideas about how this might be extended. But all that speculation is very abstract. And we've yet to see any really concrete ideas that say, this is what the open source model is, this is what it is not. So where are those boundaries? And then where can you apply that model? So we're hoping to shed some light on that as well. As we address the success mystery, maybe we can begin to address these mysteries. And we suspect there might be some fundamental organizing principles for open source. And we may know we've got those if we find an answer that kind of addresses all three mysteries. So if we can do that, we may have begun to define what that model is, which can lead us towards this idea of a more general model that can be applied beyond software. So that's kind of the ulterior motive here, but again, the direct approach of the research is to address the sense. Okay, so our research model, the actual scope of the research, as you see, is within the dotted box. So we are trying to measure and relate social network structure. And again, we use these three fundamental types of social network structure: closure, bridging, and leader centrality. And we relate those to success of the project community. Now you can see we measure success and we conceptualize it as both output and activity. Output is basically the quantity of software produced by the community. So we measure that in two ways. We measure it in terms of how many code commits have happened. Basically what happens is, as developers write source code, periodically batches of code gets committed or placed into the source code repository. So every time that happens, that's counted. That's considered one commit. And those are counted. So that's kind of an intermediate work product, how many code commits there are. The other measurement of output is how many software releases there are. So what happens is periodically the administrator will look at that source code repository, make a decision, okay, it's time now to compile it, create a new version that we release to the public that can be now executable on people's computers. And that's considered a software release. And that would be where you might see version 1.0, 1.01, 1.02. That's the idea of a software release. So that's the idea of output. Now, activity is basically the quantity of participation of the community. And we measure that in two ways. One is we count how many times that software that was released is downloaded. So if you want to use the new version, you have to go and you have to download it from the project website. And so we're counting that as a measure of activity of the community. And we also, under activity, measure basically number of page hits or online viewing and browsing for the project web pages. So how many times those project web pages are being looked at is also a measure of activity. And you can see we do have the dual arrows, so we recognize that there's a reciprocal relationship here, so to some extent, the greater the output, more software produced, that will tend to lead to more activity, more downloading, more viewing. And if there's more activity and, say, more interest in the project, then that may lead to more output, more development of software. So we recognize these two are related, even though we do measure them and treat them separately in the hypothesis. Now, within the scope of the research, we also recognize there are some mediating factors that might affect this relationship. For example, the size of the group, the type of the project, the type of the task involved, the norms of the community. For example, think of those corporate sponsored projects. Probably there's different norms involved there, so that may be a mediating factor. Maturity of the project. The kinds of structures that are relevant in an early stage project might be different than what we might see in a very mature project. So what we do in the research, we do try as much as possible to control for those factors. And I'll describe the study population definition where we do, for example, eliminate corporate sponsors. So we want to try to get a more pure, homogeneous study population. And we also focus in on the early stage projects, so we try to control for maturity and so forth. And I'll describe that shortly. So that's within the scope of the research. Now, external to the research would be external impacts. So these are things that you might think of as success, but these are things that happen outside the boundary of the community. For example, if the software that's produced by the community is accepted as an industry standard, that would be something external. Or maybe, once the community has shut down and basically they're done and they're not working anymore, maybe continued usage of the software would be kind of external impact. We recognize, that happens, but it is outside of our scope. Market factors which primarily affect that are also outside the scope. So we're really looking at what goes on inside here and output activity in the project community. Okay. Now, just to talk a little bit about social network theory before I get into talking about the propositions. There's basically two different sort of paradigms of social network theory that says, why do social networks even matter? And the first one at the top here says, the social networks are seen to be a kind of conduit for the flow of information and knowledge. What that says is, for example, if we can imagine a social network in this room where the network is defined by who gives advice to who. So, to the extent that perhaps Professor Lee gives advice to Boo, and Boo gives advice to Ken, and Ken gives advice to Brenda, then you can imagine, in some respects, how that might be a kind of flow. If you can picture the network, where some of these links are connected and some are not, you can begin to imagine that the structure of that network may either enable the flow or impede the flow. So that's why certain structures have either positive or sometimes negative impact on the outcome of the group. And there's two measures of that I'll talk about in a second. These are two of the three we're looking at. The closure and the centrality are within that kind of a paradigm. The other paradigm says it's about embeddedness. And what that says is that the performance of an individual or a group is not just based on the attributes of the individual or the group. In fact, it's also based on the embeddedness of that individual or group in the broader social network. So this is sort of the idea of it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's the general idea. Yes?
Just going back to your point about the sort of map of the social network.
Right.
Is that to be understood as an artifact of communication relationships, or do you see it as something that is prior to coordinating? How do you see it?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really both. It's seen as both. The network emerges from some underlying activity, but then the network begins to affect that activity. So there's that. It's like a coevolution. That's how it's. And one of the really good examples of embeddedness is that more than likely most of the people in this room got many of their jobs from people who were not in your direct local community. A lot of the studies have shown that jobs are found through these kind of weaker links that extend outside of your own group. But these are maybe people who knew people, that connection. So that's kind of the idea. And so that's the notion of bridging. So bridging, which is one of the three types of social network structures we looked at, bridging says, to what extent are members of the group connected to members of other groups? So that's a fairly simple idea. And the idea is that this supports access to resources that you don't